to get standing, I think. I might need to come up towards my screen a few times if there are any late joiners to let people in, but you can just ignore me when I do that. And we're just going to get into our space. If I've thrown you by asking you to get an object, just forget about it, it's not important. We're going to put that thing to the side anyway for the time being. And we're just going to get ourselves into our space and do what we need to do to feel prepared to spend maybe 30 minutes moving in a slightly different way, or getting away from our desk, or getting away from whatever it is that we've been doing today. And we're just going to think about how we're stood. So maybe we start at the feet. So you can think about really spreading out the toes. You can think about the arches, so the inside edges of the feet, the outside edges of the feet, and see if you can just tip the feet like inwards and outwards and just figure out where is the best or the most stable place for your feet to be. Once you've settled on a place, we can think about our pelvis, and maybe just slide in the pelvis forward or back. And you might notice that you have a tendency to push your hips forward, or that you have a tendency to do the opposite. And instead of thinking about straightening up, just see if you can get yourself in like the optimum position where we're not rigid, we're not expending loads of energy, we're comfortable. And then you can think about loosening off around the shoulders, around the wrists. And we can do the same with the head. Maybe we bring the chin slightly forward, the chin back. We can settle on this place in between. So we've worked from the ground, from the feet up. And then when we feel settled in our more thoughtful standing position, we can just look straight forward and just see if you can think about how you're breathing. Maybe we can do this without changing anything. So how do you normally breathe? Do we breathe in and out through the nose? Do we breathe in and out through the mouth? Are we breathing quickly, slowly? Can we just start to observe how it is that we're breathing? And then if it's possible, we're going to try and breathe in and out through the nose, if it's possible. If not, just go back to normal breathing. And then seeing if you can bring some attention to how the ribs move when we breathe. If you want to use the hands, if you find that helpful, you can, or you can just leave the hands where they are. And we're going to see if we can spread a bit of that movement from our inhale all around the rib cage. So it's not just up and down, forward and back, it's all the way around. So into the back of the body as much as the front of the body. And if you've needed to really exaggerate or strain the breathing to be able to do that, which is pretty normal, we need to exaggerate to figure out what it is we need to do. But then we're going to see if we can make it more subtle. So can we make our breathing more normal, less strained, and still try and spread a bit of that pressure out around the body? Okay, so regardless of how that went, if you're using the hands, we're just going to let the hands go. We're going to go back to our normal breathing. And then like we were starting with last month, seeing if we can just close the eyes and observe what happens to our balance. If we feel really wobbly, we're just going to open the eyes and experience our body responding and getting its balance back. And then you can choose whether you want to try that again. So depending on how your balance is, you might find that you can stay with the eyes closed for the whole time. You might need to keep opening and closing the eyes. But we're going to notice these micro changes, and you might start to notice that this happens around your pelvis, your knees, your ankles. And then the next time we open the eyes, we're going to keep the eyes open and we're going to get to move in a bit more of our body. So we're going to start with the head. We're going to let the head droop. We're going to go back to these rolling down movements that we began in July and then we kind of departed from. And we're going to see if we can let the shoulders droop. We're going to see if we can round or roll down the spine, so focusing on the back of the body, without trying to get anywhere. So we don't need to reach the floor. We're just going to see where is the biggest movement we could make. And then when we get there, we're going to start to reverse the movement and come back to standing. So you might find that you want to close the eyes for this. You might want to keep the eyes open. You might want to bend the knees. But we're going to see if we can start to get into our own rhythm, find our own speed, speed that feels helpful. And our aim is to make things easier and easier and easier, if that's possible. So putting less and less energy in, the more we do it. And can we really let the head drop? Can we let the hands flop around? Can we let the shoulders go? And we're just going to see what this movement feels like for our body. So if you need to take pauses in between, take the pauses that you need. This is it completely in your own time and based entirely on how it feels personally for you. If it feels good to kind of go down or roll down in a bit of a wave or with a bit of side to side movement, that's an option. And if it feels good to just stay and hang out there for a bit, that's an option too, but again, entirely up to you what you choose to do here. So just go based on something that feels good. And it's like we're trying to move as many pieces of the spine and of the body as possible, but in a gentle and loose way. It's like we're trying to tempt some scared animal out of a hedge. Can we just get really comfortable? Can we start to feel a bit more confident? Can we start to move a bit more? And then maybe at some point, if we feel like this is okay, we can start to turn the hips slightly off center. So twisting the torso, and then everything else remains the same. So keeping this rolling down movement. Now that we've changed the angle, we might feel different parts of the body kicking in. And then each time we come to standing, maybe we change the angle again. And if you want to stay and hold, if that feels good, you can do that. If you want to add more of a wriggle down movement, we can do that. And you might find that there are ways to roll down and back up again that you just invent for yourself. We can be creative here. Can we keep our breath quite relaxed? And if not, is there something we can do to put a bit less effort in? So the next time you're rolling down, when we can't roll down any further, we're going to take the tips of our fingers really gently to the front of our legs, somewhere easy to reach. So that might be high up the thighs, it might be towards the shins, just see where you can get to. We're going to start to think a lot about our feet. So see if you can really spread your toes. See if we can press the feet down towards the floor. And the action of pushing the feet down is going to straighten the legs a bit. Maybe not completely, but at least a little. And then we're going to bring attention to our waist and the top of our head and see if we can create some length through the spine, regardless of how big this position is or how close we are towards the floor. And then we're going to slide the tips of the fingers gently up the front of the thighs until we get back to standing. And then we're going to try it again. So we're going to go back to our more relaxed rolling down movement. See where we get to. Gently take the hands somewhere easy to reach. Press through the feet. See if we can get some length through the legs and then some length through the torso. And then see if we can keep that shape and gently slide back to our standing position. And we're just going to try that a few times. So we're essentially going from a rounded spine to a more extended spine or a more neutral spine. See if we can keep this shape. And then sliding ourselves back up to standing. We might feel that this is a lot around our waist or the backs of our legs. We might find that most of the action happens in our feet. It's going to be slightly different. We might find that our balance comes into play here. It will, no doubt. Take the breaks that you need if you feel like you need to gather yourself in between. And then if it's possible, the next time we're in our rolling down position, we're going to see if we can extend the body like before, so pressing into the feet. We're going to see if we can bend the knees and then using the hands as like your counterbalance. See if you can sit your bottom down slightly, like you're trying to sit into a chair. And then we're going to straighten the legs and come back to that position. So it might be a tiny movement, might be a small bend, or you might be able to come a bit closer towards the floor. If you're near your desk or a chair or a sofa and you feel like you need a bit of balance, you can catch hold on to something here. It might be the fireplace, it might be the edge of a sofa, you might use the wall if you need the support. But we're going to see what happens if we just bend the legs slightly here. What happens? Can we do this? So try this a few times and then we're going to come back to standing. See if we can slide the fingers all the way up the front of the thighs. We're going to get our balance back. We're going to do what we need to do to have a bit of relief in between, depending on how we felt that when. And then we're going to think about our feet. So let's forget everything that we've done so far. So thinking about our toes, just start on the foot that makes the most sense for you. We're going to take one foot and we're going to see if we can scrunch all the toes up, like we're trying to pick something up. So imagine we had like a piece of cloth or a tea towel or a stray sock. See if you can pretend that we're trying to pick something up here, and we're going to keep the toes scrunched, and we're going to see if we can lift the knee with the toes scrunched, and then we're going to place the foot down and we're going to let the toes go. And we're going to try that a few times. So scrunching as if pretending to pick up something, maybe like a pencil. And then with our imaginary pencil or piece of cloth, we're going to see if we can let it go and place it somewhere else. So scrunch the toes, place the foot. So as we lift, the toes are scrunched. And as we bring the foot back down, we're going to release the toes, like we're letting go of something. So lifting this imaginary pencil, placing it somewhere else, letting the toes go. If you get a bit of cramp, then you just need to do what it is that you need to do in order for that to go. And then we're going to swap sides and try it on the other side. So choose your imaginary object, whatever makes sense. See if we can try and pick up that imaginary object with our toes. See if we can lift that imaginary thing and see if we can place it somewhere else. And then we're going to let the toes go, like we're releasing that thing. Try it again. So in between, we might need to wiggle out, we might need to stretch the foot depending on what's happening to our feet here. Scrunching, lifting, placing the foot back down and letting the toes go. Then we're going to come back to our standing position, and the leg that we haven't just, the foot of the leg that we haven't just scrunched, we're going to take that foot back slightly and we're going to come up onto the toes. So we're going to think primarily about moving our heel up and down, so that we're coming up onto the toes and bringing the heel back down. So we might feel that this includes a bit of a stretch. We might find that this doesn't feel like too much. It's going to be very different for all of us. If you need the wall or you need something, just take your fingers somewhere that helps support you. And then as we start to lift the heel, we're going to start doing a windscreen wiper motion. Take the heel away from the centre of the body and then towards the centre of the body. So outwards and inwards. And see if we can smoosh our toes, my favourite word, into the floor as we go without straining. So we're not trying to like break anything or dislocate anything. We're just seeing where can our toes move if we take the heel from side to side. And then we're going to start to make a bigger circle with the heel. So we've done this before. Can we create more of a circle? Can we start to bring the tops of our foot or the tops of our toes into the floor? Your feet can be anywhere. They don't have to be super wide. Maybe your feet are closer together. Again, we can use the wall. We can hold onto a chair or the edge of our desks. And then once you feel like, okay, I'm done on that side, we're going to swap sides. So whichever foot you haven't just done, we're going to start with that pedaling movement of the heel. So focusing mostly on the joints of the toes, where the toes meet the rest of the foot. Can we start to bring a bit more movement into our feet? And we can start to notice as we do this, even though the emphasis is on our toes and on our heels, everything else kind of moves around. Knees move, hips move, shoulders move. And then we can start that windscreen wiper movement. So when the heel's lifted, can we turn the heel outwards and inwards? And what happens to our feet? What happens to the pressure in our toes? Where does it shift? Where does it move? And then when you're ready to change again, we can start to make this a bigger circular movement with the heel, seeing if we can start to bring the top of the foot in towards the floor, and then circling this movement around. Okay, so how does this feel for our ankle? So let's bring the feet back together, depending on what space we have, because I know we're all in different spaces. We're going to get into a position where we have got the ability to step forward. We're going to bring one foot in front of the other. If you find this really affects your balance, take your feet further apart and maybe slightly wider, and then we can work from there to make the gait a bit smaller. We're going to see if we can start to reach the hands forward and send the hips back. And we're going to experience very quickly what this does to our balance. We're going to find this relationship between our ankles, our pelvis, our shoulders. So if we're too wobbly, adjust your gait so that we're less wobbly, but we can still get a sense of what we're trying to do here. And then once we feel like we're able to move, it doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to step one foot in front of the other, and then we're going to try it again. It's completely normal for your ankles to feel like they're dancing around a bit here. And because this is the first time we've done this probably, it doesn't need to be any good. It's not going to feel very good because we're learning a new skill. So can we step one foot in front of the other if we have the space? Can we try to step forward? When we get to the end of the available space, if we don't have any, you can just swap feet on the spot. We can turn around and we're going to try it in back to where we started essentially. So sending hips back, seeing if we can reach. What does this do to our ankles? Not just our ankles, but our calf muscles. Where do our feet wobble? And can we figure out what we might need to do to become more balanced here? Where do we need to shift our weight? What can we do with the feet? What can we do with our pelvis? It can be a small movement. We don't need to be flat towards the floor or parallel towards the floor. Once we've either walked up and down or we've got back to where we started, we're going to come back to our standing position. So if you have some kind of chair or a desk that you want to hold on to, or you're near a wall, if you need the support, if you don't need the support, that's fine. We're going to step ourselves back away from something if we're using something for support, and we're going to join in that movement of lifting the knee, but without scrunching the toes this time. We're going to see if we can lift the knee. We're going to try to step forward, and as we step forward, we're going to try to lift the back foot and tip. So if you've got something to hold on to, that's good. We don't need to tip. Maybe it's just that we come onto the tiptoes of the back foot, or maybe we lift the back foot slightly. It doesn't need to be a huge movement. We're then going to step the weight back onto our back foot. Don't worry if this is too much info, because I'm going to go through it a couple of times. We're going to see if we can come back to that lifted knee position, and then we're going to step the foot back down, and we're going to try it again. So the rules are lift, step forward. So as we step forward, we're transferring the weight. We need to figure out how to come up onto the back toe. Maybe we're using the wall, the desk, the edge of our sofa or fireplace. And we're going to see if we can balance. We're going to put the back foot down. We're going to see if we can lift this front knee. We're going to step the feet back together. So we don't need to do this all at the same time. I'm just going to keep talking through so that you can see what it is we're trying to do. And then you can start to just figure out what your body needs to do in its own time. You can play with making this movement bigger or smaller. Just transferring the weight from foot to foot is quite challenging. We've got this giant step in between. And as our front foot comes towards the floor, our back foot is already coming away from the floor. If you don't need anything to support you, if you don't need a chair, you can try extending the arms. Good, and once we've tried it a few times on that side, we can reset. I always find like a fidget is a good way to reset things. And we're going to have a go on the other side. So whatever leg we haven't just moved, we're going to start from our standing position. We're going to get ourselves prepared. We're going to lift the opposite knee. We're going to take a big step forward, or the biggest step forward that we can. As we transition the weight, our back foot's going to come away from the floor, and we're going to figure out what we need to do to either tip our torso forward with or without support, or just lean forward slightly, keeping the back toe in contact with the floor, if that's a better option for you. As the weight comes back into the back leg, we're going to lift that front leg. We're going to step our feet back together. So we can adjust this to make it a reasonable level of challenge without worrying about the quality of the shape we're making. We're just playing with our balance. We're seeing if we can move the body dynamically. So we're not looking to be super still or in control necessarily. In and out of position, with or without the support. So wall, chair, sofa, desk, depending on where we are. So maybe we try this one more time. If you feel like you need breaks, remember to take the breaks that we need. So lifting, and maybe complete the next movement that you're on. So get back to our start position without rushing, so that we've got time to finish off the attempt that we want to finish off. And then we're going to come back to our standing position. So give yourself a moment to just gather ourselves back together. So from our standing position, we're going to continue this month until the end of this month with our creative sitting and standing practice. So that's what I'm calling it anyway. Again, if the floor is too far away for you, you can use the chair. You can use a chair for this. You can use a sofa for this. In whatever way makes sense, we're just going to get towards the floor or sit on a chair all the way down so that we're on our bottoms, whether we're choosing the chair or the floor or not. When we get to the floor, we're going to stand up. That's it. Those are the two rules. Stand up, sit down. Once we've gone from our basics, so standing up, sitting down, we're then going to try changing our foot position and getting towards the floor in a slightly different way. So maybe we use the hands. If you don't need to use the hands, you can take the hands away. When we get back to our sitting position, we're going to change foot position again. So maybe you just change the feet, maybe you change where the knees are, but we're going to see if we can find a slightly different way to get towards the floor and come back up again each time. If you feel a bit stuck, this is where we can all be teachers for each other. You don't need to just do what I'm doing. You can look to each other and get some ideas. You can copy each other. If it feels like too much choice, then just sitting down and getting back up again is enough. Especially if we're on a chair. Maybe we've got less options if we're on a chair. We might notice that our temperature starts to rise, that our breathing starts to become a bit more laboured, so take notice of that. We can afford to ramp things up again, but again, we want to be like manageable, so a manageable level of difficulty. The next time we get to seated, so whether we're choosing a chair or whether we're choosing the floor, the next time we sit down, we are going to stay there. So at the start, I said we were going to use some kind of object. So that object might be a book, it might be a notepad, it might be a cushion or a cuddly toy. I think one of you had a cuddly toy. Just something that we can hold in between our hands. It can be absolutely anything. We're going to get into a comfy position and we're going to use whatever object we have to be a restriction for us, and we're going to do some different work with the shoulders. So the first thing we're going to try to do, whatever we've got, and if we haven't got anything, we can just pretend. We're going to reach our object forwards in our hands. We're going to take the object around the body and we're going to see if we can swap hands. So we're going to circle around the body. Can we swap? Yeah, perfect. So we've got water bottle. I think any kind of object that we have, a good way to add in some kind of challenge is we can do this with anything. And I think the things that we already have at home are better than yoga equipment or special equipment. We're going to go around the body in one way, and we might already have started to discover lots of things about the weight of our object, the feel of our object, what it does for our wrists, how is our shoulder mobility. And then at some point we're going to swap, so we can orbit the body in a slightly different way. We might also start to come up against the space that we're in, the furniture that we have next to us. And we're going to be learning ways to like dodge those things. If our arms start to get tired, like everything else we do, we just have a bit of a break and we do the kind of movements that feel helpful. So this is the first movement. Our second movement, I'm going to turn so you can see what we're doing. We're going to reach one arm up, so the hand that we've got the object in up, we're going to take the opposite hand behind and we're going to see if we can figure out how to pass that thing from hand to hand. So the bigger the object, if it's not massively heavy, the easier it's going to be to reach. If you've got something really small, we've got a bit more work to do. And we're going to see if we can find the object behind us. We might flounder a bit, and that's completely normal. We're going to see if we can swap arms and figure out how to take our object from hand to hand. And I want you to try to fully grasp it rather than drop it. We might find that here there's a lot of coordination work to do, which is a challenge. Our brain is having to do a lot here. We might find that we miss the thing sometimes, or our fingers aren't in the place where we thought they were going to be. And then again, once we get a bit too tired, maybe we need a bit of a wriggle. Maybe we need to change position. So the third thing we're going to do, we're going to take our objects in our hands. We're going to use our head like an obstacle. So we were orbiting the body before, we're going to orbit the head now. We're going to take the block or the object behind us. We're going to see if we can take that thing around the head. So our hands aren't changing position. This object is proving a restriction for us. And we're going to see if we can circle that thing around the head without dropping the object, without changing our hand position. I've got a bit of clicking going on. And at some point, we're going to change directions. So can we move? Can we navigate the head? We might find that we catch the top of our head, or we catch our hair at some points. But moving around in the shoulders, different clickiness going on. Okay, so again, maybe a bit of a break in between, maybe a bit of a wriggle in between. And then the last thing we're going to try today, we're going to add some different things over the next few weeks. We're going to take the thing that we have up towards the ceiling, so up and over the head. We're going to see if we can take the thing behind us by bending the elbows and then straightening the elbows. Don't need to be completely straight, and we might notice that things happen to our spine, our chest, we might need to drop our chin. We're just going to see what works today and then figure out what we can change later. So some movements here. And then we're going to bring our objects down to the floor and we're just going to place them to one side. And we can change position, we can move the shoulders, we can move the elbows. We're going to bring our hands together. We're going to go back to something more familiar now. So we're going to bring our hands together and we're going to open our hands out like a book. So thumbs are going to come away from each other. We're just going to try that to begin with. So can we open the hands? And then we're going to try to open the hands and almost bring the pages or the covers of the book together. So tops of the hands together. So palms together, open the hands like a book. See if you can bring the book in half. We're going to stay with the tops of the hands together. They don't need to be fully together. We don't need to be touching thumbs or anything. And we're going to see if we can loosen off in the shoulders. So notice if you've needed to round the shoulders. Notice if you've needed to hunch forward. See if we can do anything about that. And then we're going to lower the wrists and see how that feels. So we've got tops of the hands together. And you might just want to try this a few times. It might be too intense to kind of stay there. So we can come in and out of this instead. If we can lower the wrists and stay there for a moment, again, seeing if we can loosen off from the shoulders. We're going to see if we can move the elbows from side to side. So we're having to keep a gentle amount of pressure through the tops of the hands. And then we can bring the palms back together and then we're going to wriggle out the fingers and wriggle out the wrists. Okay, so last fidget. So from this position that we're in, we're going to turn to look over one shoulder, seeing if we can use as much at the waist as possible. We're going to come back to looking forward without needing to look at me or the screen. And we're going to look up towards the ceiling. and down towards the floor. So seeing if we can keep our breath like super normal here, super natural. We're going to look forward, and then last thing we're going to do is turn to look over the opposite shoulder. Again, seeing how much of the waist we can use. And then coming back to looking forwards. And then before we need to look at anything or do anything or change anything, just have a moment to think about how you feel. And let your breath settle. And then we can start to just move around as we feel in intuitive ways. Maybe you just want to sit still for a moment and have a bit of peace and quiet before we get back to things. And that's where we're going to end for today.